Gillian's Wonderland Pier. On August 28, 1999, Kimberly Bailey took her 8-year-old daughter Jessica to Gillian's Wonderland Pier in Cape May, New Jersey. It was the kind of ordinary summer trip thousands of families take every year. A boardwalk, a pier, a ride called the Wild Wonder. They climbed into the car together. The ride began its climb up the first hill. This is the part nobody thinks about. The slow mechanical climb, the clicking of the chain pulling the car upward, the ocean visible in the distance. Then something failed that was never supposed to fail twice at once. The drag chain, the mechanism designed to pull the car to the top of the hill and release just before the descent, disconnected early. The car began rolling backward down the incline it had barely climbed. A second safety system, the anti-roll-up device, was supposed to catch it. It didn't. The car reversed, gained speed, and slammed toward a sharp turn in the track at a speed the ride was never built to take. Kimberly and Jessica were thrown from the car. Mother and daughter died together on a ride built for a family afternoon. Investigators later found the failure came down to maintenance, two separate mechanical safeguards, both compromised at the same time. The odds of that happening were supposed to be almost impossible. The Mindbender derailment, June 14, 1986. Inside West Edmonton Mall in Alberta, Canada, the world's largest indoor shopping mall, riders lined up for the Mindbender. At the time, the world's largest indoor triple-loop roller coaster. Families came for a normal mall day. Some just wanted to ride it because it was famous. A 4-car train, carrying passengers at roughly 100 kilometers per hour, entered the final loop. Then it jumped the track. The last car detached and struck a support pillar. 3 of the 4 riders inside were killed. One survivor, severely injured in the chest and neck, lived to describe what almost nobody else could. The investigation traced the failure to a support brace, a bolt that had backed out of position, throwing off the alignment of the track by a matter of millimeters. That was enough. The ride didn't reopen for more than a year, and only after the entire structural design was re-engineered. What makes this case unsettling isn't the scale, it's the setting. This didn't happen at some remote fairground. It happened inside a shopping mall, surrounded by stores, food courts, and shoppers who had no idea anything had gone wrong until they heard the sound. Parc Saint-Paul, France. A theme park outside Beauvais, France. A mother brought her family to celebrate her child's 2nd birthday. Her husband, her mother, her sister, all together for the day. They rode the Formula 1 roller coaster, a ride that had already killed once before, in 2009, when a 35-year-old woman slipped through the same restraint system. The ride was in motion. The woman began to slip over the safety bar. Her husband grabbed for her foot, trying to hold on. He couldn't. Witnesses nearby heard the scream before they understood what was happening. A woman named Feria, standing with her own children at a nearby carousel, later described hearing the sound first, then seeing what came after. Some of the children in line that day were too young to understand what they'd just watched. The park had been cleared of wrongdoing after the first death in 2009. The second death, on the same ride, over a decade later, reopened every question that first investigation had closed. The Fireball. Ohio State Fair. The Fireball wasn't a roller coaster. It didn't need tracks or hills to be dangerous. It swung riders in a giant pendulum arc while spinning them at the same time, high above the fairground. On opening day of the Ohio State Fair, the ride was mid-swing when it broke apart. A support beam, corroded from the inside by rust that had eaten away at the metal for years without being detected, snapped under the stress of the ride's motion. Riders were thrown from their seats mid-swing. A teenage boy died. 7 others were injured, some severely. The footage, captured by a bystander on their phone, showed the ride's gondola tearing free and passengers being thrown through the air in front of a crowd that had come to watch, not to witness this. The corrosion that caused the failure had been invisible from the outside. The ride had passed inspection. That's the detail that stayed with investigators. Not that the ride was old, but that everyone who looked at it, right up until the moment it broke, believed it was safe. The Fujin Raijin 2. Expo Land, Japan. A standing roller coaster. Riders faced the track upright instead of sitting, strapped in like they were about to launch into the sky. It was one of the signature rides at Expo Land, a well-known Japanese amusement park. Traveling at roughly 75 kilometers per hour, the coaster suddenly slipped off its track and struck a guardrail. One rider, a woman, was killed. 21 others were injured in the same instant. What investigators found afterward was almost harder to accept than the crash itself. The axle that failed had been cracked for months. Inspectors had missed it, run after run, ride after ride, while thousands of people climbed in and rode a machine that was already quietly breaking apart underneath them. The Quimera Coaster, La Feria, Mexico. At La Feria, one of Mexico City's oldest and most visited amusement parks, families lined up on a warm evening for the Quimera, a fast, twisting steel roller coaster known for its sharp turns and sudden drops. It wasn't a new ride. It had been running for years, carrying thousands of riders every season without incident. The train pulled out of the station the way it always did. Riders raised their hands on the first drop. Nothing about this ride looked any different from the hundreds of runs before it. Then, mid-ride, one of the cars jumped its rails. There was no single dramatic failure to point to, no obvious warning sign that had been ignored, no corner anyone had knowingly cut. What caused it was quieter than that. Metal fatigue, the kind of wear that builds up invisibly, ride after ride, year after year, until the one run where it finally gave out. The car derailed at speed. 2 riders were killed in the crash. Several others were injured as the train came apart along the track. Investigators later confirmed what the wreckage already suggested. The failure wasn't sudden negligence, but slow structural decay that had gone undetected through years of normal inspections. The park shut the ride down permanently within days. For the families of the 2 riders who never got off that night, none of it changed anything. The Haunted Mansion Fire. May 11, 1984. 8 teenagers went into a haunted house attraction, expecting to be scared for fun. Fake cobwebs, actors jumping out of the dark. The kind of harmless fear that theme parks are built to sell. A fire broke out inside the attraction. The building, designed to disorient visitors on purpose, with narrow corridors and dead-end turns meant to heighten the scare, became a trap. The same design that made the ride effective as entertainment made it almost impossible to escape once real smoke started filling the halls, instead of fake fog. Inuits earlier, these were just teenagers doing what teenagers do at a haunted attraction, laughing nervously in line, daring each other to go first, pretending they weren't scared. The lights inside were kept deliberately low so the scares would land harder. That same darkness meant that when the fire started, almost nobody could see the walls well enough to find their way back out. There were no obvious exit signs glowing through the smoke, because the entire point of the ride had been to make the layout confusing. Outside, staff and emergency crews arrived to a structure that gave up almost no information about what was happening inside it. By the time anyone was pulled free, it was already too late for all 8. All 8 teenagers died inside. It remains, to this day, one of the worst amusement park disasters in US history. Not from a mechanical failure at 60 miles an hour, but from a building that was never designed with a real emergency in mind. The tragedy forced a nationwide rethink of how haunted attractions were built, pushing parks to add illuminated exit paths and emergency lighting to rides built entirely around darkness. 6 Flags Over Texas. Rosa Esparza was riding the Texas Giant, one of the tallest wooden-steel hybrid roller coasters in the country, with her daughter beside her. Before the ride started, she told an operator she was worried her safety harness wasn't secure. She was told she was fine. The ride began. As the coaster rounded a turn, her restraint came loose. She was thrown 75 feet from the car, landing on a metal roof below. Her daughter watched it happen from the seat beside her. Up until that turn, it had been an entirely normal ride. Riders around her were laughing, hands in the air, filming the drop on their phones the way people do on every roller coaster in every park in the country. For the first stretch of the Texas Giant, nothing about the ride looked any different from the thousands of rides that had come before it that same day. That's what made the next few seconds so disorienting for everyone around her. There was no slow build-up, no warning sound, no moment where anyone else on the train even understood what had happened, until it already had. The investigation that followed forced the park to completely redesign the restraint system on every train. New seat belts, redesigned harnesses, even a test seat installed at the ride's entrance, so guests could check whether they'd fit securely before boarding. Six Flags also faced years of litigation from Rosa's family, and the case became one of the most cited examples in the industry of a warning being voiced out loud and dismissed minutes before it proved fatal. None of it came in time for Rosa. Orlando Freefall. March 24, 2022. 14-year-old Tyre Sampson stood in line at Icon Park in Orlando for the Freefall. At the time, the tallest freestanding drop tower in the world. At 430 feet, he'd told the operator he was worried about his weight and the ride's limits. He was allowed on anyway. The seat's restraint sensor had reportedly been manually adjusted to allow a wider range of riders to pass, loosening the very safety margin that was supposed to catch a case exactly like his. As the ride reached its peak and began its drop, Tyre's harness failed to hold him in place. He fell from the ride to his death in front of a crowd of strangers who had come to a theme park that night expecting nothing more than a scream and a laugh at the bottom of the drop. Tyre was a football player in Orlando on a family trip, the kind of ordinary vacation night that ends with a photo at the gift shop and a car ride home talking about which ride was the scariest. Icon Park sits in the middle of Orlando's tourist strip, surrounded by restaurants and hotel lights, families walking between attractions with nothing on their minds except where to eat afterward. Nothing about the evening suggested anything was wrong until the ride reached the top of its 430-foot tower and began its drop. Ride was permanently dismantled within weeks. An investigation later revealed the seat's sensor had been manually adjusted at some point before that night, widening the gap the restraint was allowed to close around a rider. A change that made the harness readable as locked, even when it wasn't holding him the way it was designed to. Tyre's death led to new state legislation in Florida, new inspection requirements, and a law that raised the safety standards for amusement rides across the entire state, now informally referred to by his name in local reporting. 9 rides. 9 ordinary days that were supposed to end with funnel cake and a t-shirt from the gift shop. Every single one of these parks passed inspection before the day it happened. That's the part that should stay with you. Not that the rides were obviously dangerous, but that they weren't. Right up until they were. If you want more stories like this, informative and darker than you'd expect, subscribe, and let us know in the comments which point in this story disturbed you the most.